Oftentimes, when I tell people I play Tetris, they begin looking at me sideways, trying really hard not to say, "Okay, Grandpa," because they think Tetris hasn't changed since the 80s or it's just falling blocks. How complicated can it be? I can't really blame them for their ignorance. They think I'm playing something like this. When in reality, I'm talking about something more like this. This is the hardest Tetris game ever made. There's a lot of history behind that game I just showed you. It didn't just appear out of thin air and is instead the latest in a long lineage of Tetris games that work very differently from what you might have played on the NES, the Game Boy, the DS, or the Switch. This is the story of an alternate Tetris timeline, one that culminates with the hardest Tetris game ever made and begins with Sega's Tetris. Not to be confused with the 1999 arcade game Sega Tetris. Just saying. First appearing in Japanese arcades in 1988, Tetris took Japan by storm just like the rest of the world. But even after other versions came out, players just couldn't get enough of Sega's take on the puzzle sensation. To illustrate just how utterly dominant that game was, it topped Gamest magazine's popularity chart for 11 months in a row and their top earners chart for an entire year. Even 4 whole years after coming out, this one arcade in Japan still had 10 Tetris machines earning roughly 30,000 yen every day per machine. To say that Sega's Tetris was an unstoppable force would be a wild understatement. It got to the point where the best players began making their own challenges after completely maxing out every possible metric. The most famous of said challenges tasks the player with forming a smaller than or greater than pattern with their pieces and seeing how much of it they can complete before topping out. So, what was it about this game that people liked so much? Well, it introduced or refined some mechanics that completely changed the feel and flow of the game compared to other versions of Tetris. To me, the following 4 mechanics are what define Sega's Tetris. First off, lock delay. In many older Tetris games, Tetrominos would lock into place almost right after touching the ground. It wasn't quite instantaneous, there was a very short window of time between touching the ground and locking, but it was just a handful of frames. Sega's lock delay changes that by giving players a wider window of time to move their pieces even after they touch the ground. Second, the Sega rotation system. Although there are a lot of things to say about it, I'll take the liberty of skipping to the most important part. Every piece except I is always aligned to the bottom of its bounding box. In practice, this means they can be rotated even when they're resting on a surface, sidestepping those frustrating moments when you're trying to rotate a piece and nothing happens because it's an invalid rotation. And all of this is done without resorting to more complex systems like wall kicks. It's all baked into the basic rotation rules. Third, delayed auto shift, or DAS for short. When you're moving a piece left and right by holding a direction, it doesn't go into max speed right away, and instead slowly speeds up as you hold the directional button, or in this case, the joystick. It's a bit like holding a key in a text field or setting the time on an alarm clock. This is far from the first or only Tetris game to include DAS, but the nice thing here is that it's much faster than other games. Moving pieces left and right is very snappy and satisfying here. You can even start holding a direction during lock delay, and your next piece will build up speed ahead of time, allowing it to start at maximum speed as soon as it appears, and taking us from DAS to charged DAS. Sounds powerful. And finally, there's ARE, a small period of time between a Tetramino locking down and the next one appearing on the playing field. Again, like DAS, other Tetris games at the time featured a similar mechanic, though it was probably more because of technical limitations than anything else. Some of you may be wondering what ARE stands for, and the answer is that. No, really, ARE isn't an acronym. As it turns out, players just couldn't come up with an accurate name, so they literally just called it Are, which means that in Japanese. ARE isn't a very self-explanatory term, however, so from this point on, I'll refer to it as entry delay. At first glance, these four mechanics might not seem like much, but they all give the player just a fraction of a second more to think about their next move, as well as the power to execute said move. This allowed Sega to crank up the speed significantly more than other Tetris games, instead of needing to rely on an indefinitely sustainable speed ceiling or something like NES Tetris's infamous kill screen. Simply put, this game won't snap in pieces even after things start getting really fast. On that subject, even the way this game handles speed is worth mentioning. Unlike most Tetris games, where the speed curve is basically a one-way trip to the moon, Sega Tetris adopts a more dynamic approach. It goes up, then down, then back up, then back down, giving players the chance to fix their stack during slower sections and challenge themselves during faster sections. However, more than anything I said before, what really matters is that this game has a monkey. Inspired by Sega's unparalleled ability to bring pixelated primates to life, it wouldn't take long until fans began iterating on Sega's rule set by creating their clones with some new ideas tossed into the mix. In 1989, a developer named Jun Shimizu released his version of Tetris titled Tetris Semi-Pro-68K for the Sharp X68000, a Japan-exclusive home computer capable of delivering arcade-quality graphics with a price to match. The game's name is admittedly a bit of a mouthful, so most people just call it Shimizu Tetris after its author. I'll refer to the game by that name from now on. Since it's a PC game, Shimizu Tetris is much more customizable than any arcade game could ever hope to be, letting you change things like the controls, the field size, and the delay timings, among other gameplay elements. It also features a plethora of modes like Versus, Doubles, and Flashpoint. Like a lot of video games, Shimizu Tetris has multiple difficulties: easiest, easy, normal, hard, and hardest. If I told you there were 3 more difficulties beyond hardest, you would probably expect something like extreme or hardester or death. But instead you have 2-cell, 3-cell, and 20-cell. To understand what these terms mean, we first need to break down how gravity works in Tetris. Now, I'm no programmer or Tetris expert, and odds are neither are you, so I'm only going to explain the basics. The standard Tetris playing field has a size ranging from 10 by 16 cells to 10 by 24 cells. Most of the time, the matrix has a size of 10 by 20 with an extra 4 to 20 hidden or semi-hidden rows, but for the sake of simplicity, let's just pretend those hidden rows don't exist for this explanation. When a Tetramino spawns on the playing field, it starts at row 20 and moves downward at a regular rate every frame until it hits the stack or the ground. So 2-cell means that pieces fall at a rate of 2 rows per frame. Nothing special so far. Flashpoint and Block Seed had 2-cell fall speeds. Following that logic, 3-cell is 3 rows per frame. And finally comes the big one, 20-cell. Infinite gravity. The blocks fall so incredibly quickly that you can't even see them fall anymore. They just appear at the bottom of the screen immediately. In a game that works like NES Tetris, this would be instant death. If you can't move your pieces after they hit the ground, but they literally hit the ground the second they appear, you can't do anything. But Sega Tetris does let you move pieces after they hit the ground. Remember, lock delay. And Shimizu Tetris took that idea to the next level. And guess what? It works! It's freakishly hard, but it's not impossible. If you got really good at the game, you could definitely survive this. Shimizu Tetris successfully expanded upon the foundation created by Sega Tetris. The only problem is that most people couldn't play it because, again, the Sharp X68000 was really expensive. But that's okay, because the next Sega Tetris successor would go back to the arcade and take us one step closer to the hardest Tetris game ever made. In 1995, a group of ex-Capcom employees formed a new game studio. Among them were Akira Nishitani, best known for designing Final Fight and Street Fighter II, Junichi Ono, creator of the Dark Stalkers and Night Warriors series, and Ichiro Mihara, who had a hand designing Mega Man 5 and Puzznic among others. This new studio was named Arika, not Akira, Arika, which is Akira's name spelled backwards because he's the studio's founder and president. Even the Sega Saturn magazine got that one wrong at times. Arika's first project was a big one. Street Fighter EX was the series' first foray into 3D, most likely in an attempt to compete with fellow 3D fighting games Virtua Fighter and Tekken. This video isn't about Street Fighter EX or EX Plus or EX2, but I thought I should mention them since they were pretty important to Arika's history. It's the game Arika released after those three that counts. A Tetris game spearheaded by Arika's vice president, Ichiro Mihara. Mihara was a big Tetris fan, and he especially loved Sega's Tetris on the arcade. He was also a fan of Downtown no Gotsue Kanji, a variety show hosted by famous Japanese comedy duo Hamada Masatoshi and Matsumoto Hitoshi, where contestants would sometimes play video games, including Super Tetris 3 for the Super Famicom. This gave Mihara an idea. What if Arika designed a competitive Tetris game so the contestants could play that on the show? Before going any further, I need to talk about an important concept with a somewhat crude name: garbage. In Tetris, garbage is the term used to describe blocks that are sent to the bottom of your stack in order to put you at a disadvantage. Many versus Tetris games work by having you send garbage to your opponent whenever you clear lines or perform special moves like T-spins, with the goal being to eventually make them top out. But what Mihara had in mind was something more complex than that. He wanted to add an additional layer of strategy by, for example, giving the players fine control over where they would send their garbage and what that garbage would look like. Now, I'm about to read some quotes from an interview with Mihara that dates back to the early 2000s. The only problem is that the English translations on Arika's website are serviceable at best. Lacking the budget or resources to retranslate them from Japanese, I had to make do with what I had and chose to localize the existing translations instead. Throughout this video, you'll notice that some quotes are colored differently. That's to let you know that they're localized and should be taken with a grain of salt. Here's an example. There was a TV program called Downtown no Gotsue Kanji, and sometimes the contestants would play Tetris. Seeing that, the staff and I started talking about how interesting it would be to make a console version of Tetris that focused on competitive multiplayer. Mihara shared his idea for a competitive Tetris game with Mr. Matsumoto, but he rejected it, saying that Tetris is interesting because it's simple and adding new mechanics might not be a great idea. Unfortunately, before Arika could create a revised prototype based on this feedback, the show was cancelled. Naturally, you can't make a Tetris game designed to be played on a show that no longer exists, so that disappeared into the aether as well. Until a short while later, when Mihara got mad at something, prompting him to resume development on his Tetris game. We stopped working on the game because the show got cancelled, but about 6 months later, an incident occurred. I felt frustrated and therefore decided to make a Tetris game. I just felt like it was the right time to make a Tetris game for the arcade, which is why we resumed development. I have no idea what this incident is, but it has to be one of the greatest incidents in gaming history because it resulted in the release of the next game in the Sega Tetris bloodline, Tetris the Grand Master. Tetris the Grand Master, which I will refer to as TGM from this point on, is a Japan exclusive, until recently that is, arcade game released in 1998. Unlike most Tetris games where the goal is to get the highest score possible until the inevitable top out, TGM features a grade system based on the Dan ranking system found in Go and Shogi, and the goal is instead to get the highest grade possible. The grades go from 9 to 1, then S1 to S9, and finally, the highest grade, Grand Master, abbreviated to GM. The player begins at 9 and must work their way up to GM by increasing their score. Each grade requires a certain score to reach it, which the game will show right under your current grade. Attain a new grade and you'll get to hear an energizing fanfare to go along with your achievement. The only grade that works a little differently is GM. More on that later. TGM also sets itself apart from other Tetris games through its unique level system. Instead of going on until you lose or until you clear a certain number of lines, TGM games work with levels from 0 to 999. Each time a piece locks into place, the level increases by 1, and each time lines are cleared, the level increases by the number of lines cleared. When the player tops out or reaches level 999, the game ends. Every chunk of 100 levels is called a section, and the only way to go from one section to the next, say 99 to 100, is by clearing a line. At that point, the background will change to let you know that you're in a new section. You can keep dropping Tetraminos till Rockstar releases GTA 6, but if you don't clear a line, you will stay stuck at 99, which is probably why players call the 99s level stops. The only exception to this rule is the final level stop, which is at 998 because 999 is the end of the game. Speed also works very differently here. Just like Sega Tetris, it's dynamic and works along a curve rather than a straight line. It starts out nice and slow, you even get a ghost piece for the first section, then it hits a brick wall at level 200, giving you a chance to fix your mistakes, and then the speed goes up and up and up and up and up, and then at around level 490, something strange happens. The music stops. You wonder what's going on. Is it a bug? No. Does it mean you did something wrong? No. It means the real game is about to begin. Starting at level 500, the music goes nuts. The game goes into maximum speed, and things remain that way until the end. Remember the 20-cell difficulty from Shimizu Tetris? The one where pieces drop from the top of the playing field to the very bottom in 1/60th of a second? It's lifted from that, only this time it's not optional, and it has a different name too. Instead of cell, TGM's internal unit for gravity is a much more intuitively named G, thus giving birth to one of the most important concepts in TGM, 20G, infinite gravity. By the time the game gets that fast, the pieces fall so incredibly quickly that they just won't have time to reach the edges of the playing field before they hit the ground. I'll explore this crazy mechanic and all of its quirks in much more detail later in the video, but for the time being, know that the usual stacking strategy is completely turned on its head. To further iterate on that, and to give the player a fighting chance against this monstrously high speed, a simple but ingenious new mechanic was introduced.
Jill, use it! Kill it, whatever it is!
The Initial Rotation System, or IRS. No, not that one.
I don't care who the IRS sends, I am not paying taxes.
IRS allows you to rotate a piece during the entry delay. You can just hold the rotation button and the piece will already be rotated in that direction when it appears. It sounds somewhat useless, but it's actually really important when, you're playing with infinite gravity. A common use case is when you want to tuck an eyepiece into a well. If you don't use IRS to rotate it before it spawns, you won't have enough clearance to rotate your piece, causing it to lay flat right above your well and potentially destroying your run instantly. Again, I'm going to leave a lot of details for later, but I'm telling you now, if you don't take advantage of the entry delay, you will not survive until the end. Man, that's starting to be a lot of future superclass topics. Speaking of future superclass topics, now is an excellent time to come back to the GM grade. Unlike the other grades, achieving a high score isn't enough for a run to be GM worthy. You may have noticed that the timer is absolutely huge in TGM. It's actually almost as large as your current grade. That's because your speed is almost as important as your grade. To be awarded a GM grade, by level 300, the player must be at grade 1 or higher in 4 minutes and 15 seconds or less. By level 500, the player must be at grade S4 or higher in 7.5 minutes or less. And finally, the player must complete the game with at least 126,000 points in less than 13.5 minutes. Meet all of those conditions and you're Grandmaster. If you're amazing at scoring Tetrises, but you're slow as molasses, S9. If you're a speed demon, but you keep clearing 1 to 2 lines at a time, S9. And even if you do manage to get a GM grade, time is still very important, because between 2 GM runs, the faster one will always be higher on the leaderboard. If you're a beginner playing normally, time isn't a big issue. Just surviving until 999 is enough of a challenge, but once Grandmasters start competing with each other, the entire game turns into a mad speedrun to the finish line. Having said all of that stuff about infinite gravity and entry delay and IRS and DAS and time and efficiency, I hope you've realized that TGM is hard. Really, really hard. You might wonder what kind of player could possibly manage to become a Grandmaster. Well, 4 months after the game's release, a player going by Ozone became the very first Tetris Grandmaster, outside of internal testing at least, and was personally awarded a TGM arcade board by none other than Mihara himself. Since then, quite a lot of people have managed to get the coveted grade, myself included, and nowadays, while it's still considered a difficult feat that could take several months to achieve, it's far from impossible. If you're not looking to become a Grandmaster, there are a couple of alternative ways to enjoy TGM. Remember the greater than, smaller than symbol challenge created by Sega Tetris superfans to stave off boredom? It's back, and this time it's been implemented into the game for real. Begin creating the shape in a regular game, and when you top out, you'll be awarded a secret grade depending on how much of the pattern is completed. Ever since its inclusion in TGM, the name Secret Grade stuck around, and whenever players tackle this challenge in other Tetris games, they still call it Secret Grade, even when there are no grades to speak of. And if you find the game too easy, too hard, or too boring for your liking, why not take a gander at the cheat code?
Infinite ammo.
Successfully input a code at the title screen and it'll be listed in the bottom right corner. TLS mode lets you keep the ghost piece for your entire run as opposed to the first 100 levels. 20G mode is exactly what it says on the tin, not for the faint of heart. Big mode makes every piece twice as large. Monochrome mode makes every piece black and white. Reverse mode literally turns the entire game upside down. And finally, Uki mode makes a kid giggle every time you clear multiple lines at once. You know, Uki is the Japanese onomatopoeia for a monkey sound, which means they sort of brought back the monkey. By the way, the cheat codes stack, so you can have big 20G mode or reverse monochrome mode or big 20G TLS monochrome reverse Uki mode if you're feeling particularly masochistic. However, if you're feeling competitive instead, there's a multiplayer mode too. I mean, TGM started out as a competitive game for a variety show, and playing head-to-head against another human is a pretty integral part of competition if you ask me. Before I go any further, allow me to give a hearty shout out to Color Thief's excellent guide on versus TGM because I borrowed a lot of information from him. Anyhow, by pressing start on their side of the arcade machine, a second player can interrupt a single player game at any point and challenge them to a versus game. Which sounds pretty inconvenient if you ask me. Imagine losing a GM run because someone pressed start and you couldn't do anything about it. There is a way to disable versus entirely and just have 2 single player games side by side, but only through the operator settings? Why? This may look familiar if you've played other Tetris games in versus mode, and your initial reaction might be similar to mine. Oh, you clear lines, you send garbage, high scoring techniques, and more garbage, and you win when your opponent tops out. Same old, same old. Oh no, no, no. While the goal is still to send garbage and cause your opponent to top out, that's where the similarities end. Remember when Mihara pitched his competitive Tetris idea to Matsumoto? This is it. He actually managed to turn it into a real thing. A tactical take on the versus Tetris concept, a clash of wits rather than a clash of speed. One of the key features of TGM's versus mode is its garbage system. As I alluded to earlier in this video, you have fine control over the garbage you send. Aside from a few exceptions, which I won't get into, any garbage you send is a copy of the lines you clear without the clearing piece and vertically flipped, as long as you clear more than one line, that is. If you keep these simple rules in mind, you can easily picture what your garbage will look like. It's not just about sending a lot of garbage, it's about sending the nastiest garbage known to man, quality over quantity. I could really legitimately go on and on about how insane this versus mode is, but I feel like it's more the topic of a different video. It's just talking to Color Thief, who helped me make this video, made me realize, okay, this is too important not to talk about. So I really wanted to give a little bit of time to this. But seriously, there are items, there's a shotgun, there's a laser that you can mash to widen and the other guy can mash to shorten it. It's really some crazy stuff. So maybe someday, possibly I'm gonna make a different video about this, but I really want you to keep in mind, this is not a game of chess like NES Tetris or an anime fight like Guideline Tetris. Offense, defense, mix-ups, mind games. This is a fighting game, and a very underrated one at that. Speaking of underrated, more people should talk about the soundtrack. It's so good. Instead of picking a track before starting a run and sticking to it until the end, TGM automatically changes the music at key points in the game. It starts out fairly tame, sounding suspiciously similar to Chun-Li's theme in Street Fighter Alpha 3. Which ends up making a lot of sense because both tracks use the same sample. Then it gets much more intense at 20G to reflect the increased speed. Which certainly doesn't help if you're not so great at the game and you're already crapping your pants. Then you hit the credits and it's back to chill music. And then the versus music kind of sounds like you're fighting aliens in cyberspace. On that note, that's pretty much it for TGM. It's one hell of a game. It took the best ideas from Sega and Shimizu and added so much polish and so many new and unique ideas that it truly stands out as its own thing. TGM wants to test you. It's a harder, speedier, snappier flavor of Tetris, and players absolutely loved it. So Rika did what any smart developer would do with a successful game. They made another one. Tetris the Grand Master 2, The Absolute, was unleashed upon Japanese arcades in October 2000. This sequel greatly expands upon the original by adding a litany of new ideas, new mechanics, and even some quality of life changes. And guess what? They made it even harder than the first game. Yeah, Mihara's reasoning was, if players mastered the first game, then let's make a sequel and set the bar even higher so they have to master that instead. Look! A main menu. If you're very knowledgeable about this stuff, you might be thinking, no one's playing that version of TGM2. What about the other one? Shh, we're not there yet. Until further notice, we're exclusively talking about OG TGM2. The first edition you'll notice, aside from the catchy music and the animated backgrounds, is Normal Mode. Normal Mode is a heavily stripped down version of TGM. Everything is much slower, there are no grades, no level stops, no 999 levels of pain, and your score is on steroids. You will hit 100k and up without even trying. All you have to do is get to level 300 and you're done. That's not to say it's just your regular Tetris affair. You still have a huge timer menacingly staring at you. We're still working with the same delays and controls as the last game, with the exception of a brand new mechanic I'll be getting into in not too long. The game will sometimes toss you some useful items to clean up your stack, and when you hit level 300, the credits begin scrolling and look, 20G is back. So if you paid attention and connected the dots, this is not really normal mode. A more accurate name would be easy or beginner. And I'm not trying to say this in some kind of pejorative way.
We're gonna start the smack talk
There's
now.
this mode called easy mode. I just switch it. It's way easier.
No, just keep talking.
Not everyone is talented at video games, and not everyone wants to or has the time to get good. So it's more than okay to include an easier difficulty if it makes the game more accessible. The whole video game difficulty argument is a can of worms I'd rather not open, so I'll leave things at that and move on to the actual successor to TGM1's hardcore gameplay, Master Mode. This is much more familiar. Grades from 9 to GM, 999 levels, sections, double stops, changing music, speed bump at level 200, and 20G starting at level 500. It's all back with a bunch of refinements and additions to boot. Chief among them is, in my opinion, one of the greatest mechanics to ever grace a Tetris game. Players call it the Sonic Drop. Now, before you run to the comments to correct me and say, actually it's called a hard drop, no, this is the Sonic Drop. It's not the same thing and has a much cooler name too, but it does work very similarly. You push the joystick upwards to instantly drop a piece to the bottom of the stack. There's a twist though. Unlike the hard drop seen in modern Tetris games, your piece does not lock into place when it hits the stack. You instead lock it manually by pushing down. As long as the lock timer doesn't hit 0, you can still move your piece the exact same way you could if you waited for it to land normally or after a soft drop, so it's not really a drop. It's a teleport. And again, we're going back to this simplicity thing. It's a very simple tweak on paper, but it makes a world of difference in practice. For one, having any kind of quick drop instantly makes the first 500 levels significantly faster, and believe me, soft dropping your way through your runs gets really annoying after a while. But what really makes this mechanic special is the manual lock, which allows for an unparalleled level of precision and speed. In Guideline Tetris, if you make a mistake and want to correct it, or if you want to perform a T-spin, you have to soft drop your piece until it hits the stack, then perform your moves and rotations, then press up to lock your piece. TGM1 is actually even worse in my opinion because soft dropping and locking are bound to the same freaking button, which results in a lot of accidental locks if you don't let go of the joystick in time. So one system is easy to use but slow, and the other one is hard to use but fast. Pick your poison. Or not. Enter the Sonic Drop, and now you can do this. It's fast, it's precise, it's easy, you can correct mistakes in a flash. It does take some time to get used to, but I believe it's worth it for all the time you save in the long run. In some cases, you can go even faster by not letting go of the stick at all and making a circular motion instead. The street fighting boys and girls among you may have noticed that this input is very similar to Zangief's spinning pile driver, which is why fans named this technique the Zangie move. Life is full of beautiful irony, isn't it? And yes, I know you can achieve similar results by setting SDF to infinite in Tetrio, but how many people will actually go out of their way to do this? Also, it's not the default behavior of the Guideline games, so I'm not counting that. Next up on the list of changes are the medals. You can earn them throughout a run by accomplishing tasks like clearing the entire playing field, or completing a section in record time, or rotating your pieces a bunch. No, really. Any medals you earn will be displayed right below your grade. They range from bronze to gold depending on how well you complete each task. So, for example, getting 10 Tetrises nets you the bronze S-Key medal, 20 nets you silver, and 35 nets you gold. Now, why would you do all of these tasks on top of trying to survive? To get a score bonus, perhaps? Nope. They're shown on the leaderboard entries, so maybe to get a slight edge in your placement? Nope. They don't do anything. They don't count towards your final score in any way, shape, or form. They're just for bragging rights. God bless Eureka. And now comes the grading system. On the surface, not much has changed. Grades now go from 9 to 1, S1 to S9, then is the new M grade, and finally, GM. And the game won't tell you how many points you need to reach the next grade anymore. But take a peek under the hood, and you'll find that everything is completely different and much more punishing than the previous game. Instead of merely using the player score to assign them a grade, TGM2 uses an internal grade system hidden from the player. Internal grade points are awarded when a player clears a line. Well, other variables are taken into account, but getting into the details would make this video way too dense and we don't have time for that. When the points hit 100 or more, the variable is reset to 0 and the internal grade is incremented by 1. Internal grades go from 0 to 31, with 0 being 9 in game and 31 being S9 in game. The quick mathers among you will have noticed that 31 internal grades representing 20 in-game grades doesn't add up in the slightest. That's because multiple internal grades often represent the same in-game grade. What really makes this system tick is grade decay. For every frame of gameplay where the player has control of a piece but doesn't have a combo going, the internal grade points will gradually decrease until they hit 0 and it's back to square 1. This forces you to stay in control if you want to make progress. Oh, and if that wasn't enough, did I mention that the speed keeps increasing after it hits 20G? You might be asking, Superclass, I thought 20G was infinite gravity. You can't count past infinity. Well, while there are ways to count past infinity from a Tetris standpoint, you can just reduce the delays. If the delays give you a small window of time to think, you can just give the player even less time to think by making that small window even smaller. Just compare the speed at level 500 to the speed at level 900. Even after hitting 20G, the game still manages to get almost twice as fast by the time you hit the credits. Know that I'm somehow leaving out a pretty significant number of small details for the sake of brevity, but I hope you get the point. And if that wasn't hard enough, guess what? It gets even harder. The M and GM grades work under different rules. Again, to unlock the M grade, one must meet the following requirements, which can pretty much be summarized as complete each section very quickly and with a lot of Tetrises, and no slower than the previous sections. If all of those conditions are met upon hitting level 999, a triumphant fanfare will play. The timer will stop, the credits will begin to scroll, and the entire playing field will be cleared to make way for Master Mode's ultimate challenge, the infamous M-roll, or as I call it, Invisible Tetris. You can see the blocks as long as you can control them, but the second they lock into place, they turn invisible. On top of every other challenge the game throws at you, you don't even have the luxury of seeing your stack anymore. You have to remember what it looks like and you will meet certain death if you don't and receive the M grade. If you don't meet the conditions to trigger the invisible M roll, you'll be faced with a fading roll instead. It's a good thing you can just memorize the order of the credits so you can tell when they're about to end. Except you can't because Eureka thought of that ahead of time and randomized the credits just to make sure you could never know how far you are. But if you do manage to overcome the insane speeds, the part times, the grade decay, and the invisible M roll, you will be crowned Grand Master. As you can see, getting a GM in TGM2 is a whole different ballgame compared to TGM1. In the end, I believe Eureka's end goal with this new grading system is to make sure the player is proficient throughout the whole game. Back in TGM1, where your grade was almost exclusively based on score, and there were 3 part times to meet, 2 of which more or less didn't matter, a player could theoretically play like a god for 3/4 of their run, and then slack off until they hit level 999, and as long as they played fast enough, they would still get a GM. You had to play well, but you didn't have to do so at every speed level. In TGM2, however, grade decay forces you to keep playing well until the end. If you play like a god for 3/4 of your run, hit S5 and then slack off until you hit level 999, you will stay at S5 or very close to S5. Not to mention that late game line clears boost your grade way more than early game line clears. Should you attempt to become a TGM2 Grandmaster, you don't really need to bother remembering all of this stuff. Play fast, play well, and most of all, do so the whole way through. Good luck. Whew. That was, something. And we're not done yet because multiplayer is back, baby. But now when a second player presses start, they actually get to pick between single player and versus themselves. Well, you could also do that in one, but the operator had to set it in the service menu. Player 1 can even press start during a single player game to disable versus entirely, which will be shown to others as a beautifully English "No more challenger" message. Should both players agree to a match, it's pretty much like TGM1's crazy puzzle fight gameplay with a few incremental changes. Items, rounds, and gauges all make a return, and you can disable items and/or garbage by inputting the following codes on both sides. Here's where things get more interesting. If player 2 presses start while player 1 is holding start, a new option will appear: doubles. Yes, the very same doubles mode seen in games like Spectrum Holobyte's Super Tetris, Sega Tetris on the Mega Drive, which was cancelled but is still worth mentioning, and Shimizu Tetris. Actually, Mihara quite literally said that's where he got the idea. A no-license Tetris on the X68000. Lol. Players must each get to level 300 on a shared 14-block whiteboard, and if either of them tops out, it's game over for the other player as well. This is important because once a player hits level 300, they'll enter 20G until the other one is done. Carrying is not an option here. It's imperative that both players finish at around the same time if they want to survive. Oh, and the music kicks ass. Again, just saying. It has this very early 2000s techno vibe that I find fairly endearing with a lot of strange and interesting instruments in the back. It reuses that Chun-Li sample from earlier, and just like TGM1, it goes from engaging to intense to harmonica to absolute pandemonium. To fighting aliens in cyberspace. This game rocks. I think it's an improvement over TGM1 in basically every way possible. The sonic drop is an absolute game changer for the early levels. The controls feel extremely snappy and responsive. The backgrounds are some of my favorites in any Tetris game, save for maybe Tetris Effect, and they managed to make it significantly harder than the previous one, but it's still extremely well balanced and entertaining. TGM1 wanted to test you. This game wants to push you to your limits, and it was another hit for Arika. Not quite as successful as the previous game, but still. Arcades bought board after board and players inserted coin after coin, so Arika did what any smart developer would do with a successful game. They did not make another one. But they did make a free expansion that made the game even better, and harder, and more extreme, which would result in more game overs, which would result in more quarters, which would result in more profit for arcades. Capitalism. Tetris the Grand Master 2, the Absolute Plus, is an insane title, which is why players just call it TAP and why I intend to do the same from now on. TAP is mostly the same game with 2 new modes, a couple of tweaks, and a shiny plus at the bottom of the screen in case you forget which version you're playing. As you can see, the main menu is a lot more crowded than before. Doubles is now accessible from the main menu. TGM Plus is just the main game, but slightly slower and without ranks, medals, or grades. Instead, you have to deal with garbage that rises if you haven't cleared any lines in a while. This mode really just replicates the gameplay seen in Sega's Block Seed, minus the items that were in that game. But let's be honest, neither of those modes are the first thing you noticed. It's time to address the elephant in the room, TAP's most infamous mode, the Absolute. Death. Why, oh why, is there a mode called Death in the Tetris game? Because it's 999 levels of 20G, starting at 0. Because it keeps getting faster until it becomes even faster than Master Mode at its fastest speed. Because if you take too long to reach level 500, the game decides you're not good enough to continue and kicks you out. Excellent, but let's go better next time. This is called a Torikan, an abbreviation of the Japanese term Toriaizu Counta Stop, which translates to maxed out for the time being. Hit level 503.25 or less, or it's an instant game over. If you do make it past the Torikan, you automatically get an M grade. If you somehow make it to the end, you're a Grandmaster. Speed doesn't matter, score doesn't matter, surviving the credits doesn't matter. Any monster beastly enough to survive this hell deserves to be a Grandmaster. I cannot overstate how insanely difficult this is. I've been playing TGM 1 and 2 for about 3 years, and I've been into Tetris as a whole for about 6. I assessed nearly every mode in Tetris Effect, and yet I have never been able to get past level 500 in Death because, well, I have a bit of a skill issue, but you get the point. This is what Mihara had to say regarding Death Mode. You may think I'm being too hard, but I think making Death Mode completable was the wrong decision. I think there is a certain threshold past which a given task is absolutely impossible for human beings. Death Mode was created by averaging the highest level of gameplay a human can handle. Since it's an average, the overall difficulty is still slightly below impossible, so it's possible to get through some of Death Mode. To be honest, I wanted to let Death Mode reign as a brick wall. A wall that you can bash your head against with another player. That's right, Death Versus is now available in addition to regular Versus if you feel like finding the game and another player at the same time. Speaking of bashing your head against a wall, they made Master Mode even harder than the base game. Everything I said about the grading system and maintaining control at high speeds is still valid, but the emerald conditions are significantly more punishing. And then, even if you unlock the emerald and survive until the end and get a GM, you still don't have the top rank because it's now split into 2 types, green line and orange line. If you just, and I'm putting a lot of quotation marks around that just, beat the invisible credits, your leaderboard entry will have a green underline, but if you clear at least 32 lines during the emerald, you have an orange line. And orange line GMs will always be higher on the leaderboard regardless of time or score, making it TAP's true top rank. And then Mihara had the balls to expect the first GM would be achieved between 3 to 6 months after the game came out. It wound up taking an entire year, and I suspect that was a green line too. I hate this game, and I love it so much at the same time. On that note, let's explore some cheat codes. Let's take a break. 20G, Big Mode, and TLS return from TGM 1, and there's a new item mode that causes item pieces to appear just like in Versus mode. There's one caveat though. Everything is sent to your board, including attacks. And now, a second of silence for the death of Uti, Reverse, and Monochrome mode. And with that, we're all done with TGM 2. For real this time. I mean, what can I say about TAP? It's the same game but with more stuff. There aren't many reasons to play the base game over this. TGM 1 wanted to test you, vanilla TGM 2 wanted to push you to your limits. This game wants to push you to your absolute limits. Having perfected a game that was already very refined to begin with, Eureka's job with TGM 2 was done. So they did what any developer with a lot of passion and energy would do. They made another one. Let's take a step back and summarize everything that led to this game. In 1988, Sega launched a radically different Tetris game, which led players to grind and create challenges to make it harder, which led Jun Shimizu to make a clone that was even harder, which led Eureka to make 2 official games that were even harder, which led players to grind and master them, which led Eureka to make Tetris the Grand Master 3. Terror Instinct, the hardest Tetris game ever made. Traumatizing players since 2005, Terror Instinct has a strangely foreboding title that sounds like a horror game, until you actually attempt to play the game and come to a shocking realization. This is a horror game. It's also the most ambitious TGM game so far. The jumping quality and features between Tap and this game is simply put immense. First and foremost, players now get to choose between two rotation systems, Classic and World. Classic is the rotation system we've known and loved since TGM 1, with a few tweaks that I'll cover later in this video. But the interesting option here is World. What the hell does World mean? Well, there's this game called Tetris Worlds, which has a story mode where the Tetraminos formed a civilization and they're trying to find a new planet to live on. Okay, what is this? I'm not wasting any more time on this. All you need to know is that Tetris Worlds was the first Tetris game to officially implement the rotation system used in all subsequent official games. The Super Rotation System, or SRS for short. Its goal is to be a flexible, intuitive system meant to ease newcomers into Tetris. It has its quirks, so much so that I made a whole video about it. So what is that doing in a hardcore Tetris series with a mode literally called Death? Well, I'd like to remind you of a little something named the Tetris Guideline, the Bible of Tetris rules. Many of TGM's rules don't match the guideline, so the Tetris company almost definitely forced Eureka to include SRS in order to bring TGM3 closer to the guideline. Either way, what's done is done, and every mode in TGM3 is now split into two categories, Classic and World. Remember this is going to be important later. You now have a 3-piece preview and... what's that? You can hold pieces now! Yup. You can even do it during the entry delay, just like initial rotation, but initial hold instead. You can no longer see your score, or even your grade during gameplay. Those are now only revealed at the end of a run, along with some graphs relevant to your performance. Unfortunately, this change also means no more. T-spins are now recognized as an official move in this game. In my last Tetris video, I spent 15 years going, T-spins can be worth more points than Tetris occupied. In addition, either side C or D or both must be occupied. Also, you spin your T-block into it. The end. And still manage to leave out important details. But here, it's really simple. If you clear a line by rotating a T-piece, congratulations, you've performed the T-spin, but it won't impact your score or grade in any way, shape, or form outside of easy mode. A small jingle plays every time you hit a level stop. That's good. The backgrounds are just static images that scroll, rotate, and zoom around. That's bad. I much preferred the more elaborate background animations in the previous game. And last, but definitely not least, TGM3 introduces player accounts. That's very good. Players can make accounts which will contain their name, their high scores, and most importantly, their player grade. That's right, in addition to your runs, you, the player, now have a grade as well. The music is also, in my humble opinion, the best it's been so far. Shinji Hosoe and Ayako Saso have produced a wonderfully experimental soundtrack spanning a large array of genres. Chill and upbeat hip-hop leaning heavily on the turntable. Panic-inducing techno music. Appeasing electronic music that is most definitely inspired by Yellow Magic Orchestra. This. And yes, the Chun-Li sample is still kicking. You have access to 5 modes: Easy, Sakura, Versus, Master, and Shirase. Easy is the successor to TGM2's normal mode, but it's been named properly this time. It only goes up to 200, the ghost piece never disappears, and the game goes into 20G at the end. On top of that, the game even gives you suggestions for where to place your current piece. Replacing your score and grade is Hanabi, which means fireworks in Japanese. Clearing lines will cause fireworks to go off, and your objective is to launch as many as you can. Next up is Versus mode. It's mostly like TGM2. Same old pressing start on the player 2 side to challenge player 1, same old no more challenger, but in Japanese this time, and you can still pick between Master Versus and Shirase Versus. I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but Shirase is basically death but worse. More on that later. Players can now choose between 4 attack modes. Another new addition is the clear mode, where the goal is instead to simply reach level 100, or 8 different numbers set by the operator, before your opponent. Doubles mode is pretty different compared to the last game, the biggest change being that it doesn't exist here, and not for lack of trying. Hackers found an unfinished doubles mode in the code, but it's not playable. You know what's not invisible? Sakura, a brand new mode where the goal is to clear gems as fast as possible in a series of boards with predetermined pieces. Each stage has a time limit, and if the jewels aren't cleared within that time limit, you move on to the next stage anyway. But there's also a global time limit of 3 minutes, and if that reaches 0, it's game over. But you'll be awarded extra time if you clear stages quickly, because it's TGM, so of course speed matters. Clear the 20 regular stages in less than 5 minutes and you'll be granted access to the EX stages, which are harder than the regular ones because it's TGM, so of course it gets hard. Don't worry, you'll still get a few EX stages even if you go slightly above the threshold, just not all of them. You may wonder why this mode is called Sakura. Well, it replicates the gameplay of a crossover game between Tetris and a certain anime. Its name? Tetris with Card Captor Sakura Eternal Heart. Its developer? Arika. Because it's Japan, so of course they'll put anime girls in it. And it's Arika, so of course it'll borrow some elements from a Tetris adjacent game made by Sega. This one is called Flashpoint. The Sega Tetris bloodline is still alive and well, 17 years later. Alright, it's time for the true terror to begin with Master Mode. Just like last time, Master Mode is the game's main attraction and builds on the classic gameplay fans have known, loved, and raged over for 7 years. Those veterans will immediately notice that this game's speed curve is very different. The speed curve usually looks like this. The game starts out slow, then it gradually ramps up until you hit a speed bump at level 200, then it starts increasing again until you hit 20G at level 500, and the various delays determine how fast the game is from that point on. In TGM3, however, the speed curve now mostly depends on you. If you play very well, you can hit 20G as soon as level 300, and if you don't play as well, then it's the usual 500. Basically, level scaling in a Tetris game.
Why won't you die?
Oh, and remember the Torikon thing in Death Mode? Guess what? It's back, with a vengeance. And it's in Master Mode too now. You better reach level 500 in 7 minutes or less, or else. Tough luck. I'll be honest though, if you can't play fast enough to clear this Torikon, you don't stand a chance at 20G. Grades! At this point, they're just insane. There's no other way to put it. They range from 9 to 1, S1 to S9, M1 to M9, Master, Master K, Master V, Master O, Master M, and finally, Grand Master. 3 factors influence your grade this time. The first one is a decay-based system similar to TGM2's with a couple of minute differences not worth going into. And the second one is the infamously punishing cool and regret system. TGM3 has so much attitude that it starts judging you as you're playing. Doing certain fancy tricks like combos, T-spins, and Tetrises will make the game display a cool message. That's a 2005 game, alright? If you're too sloppy, the game instead tries its best to speak a language resembling English and displays regret to let you know it's disappointed. These don't have any influence on the player's grade aside from maybe a bruised ego. What does matter is one specific type of feedback: section cools. Reaching the 70s of a section fast enough will make the game display a cool message, but this one will increase your grade by one whole level and boost the speed curve by 100 levels. And just like the previous game, you have to be consistent. If you get a section cool, you must reach the 70s in the next section no more than 2 seconds slower. This quirk makes way for a peculiar strategy. The baseline condition for the first section cool is 52 seconds, but even if a player is good enough to do it in, say, 45 seconds, they should still aim for 52 because they have to maintain that pace throughout every subsequent section except the last one. What I just described is arguably the jankiest part of TGM3. All of these systems that work to assess the player's skill are invisible. If you just grind TGM3 and don't know about any of this, you'll just go as fast as you can all the time. You'll be fine. You'll still be able to hit those section cools no problem, but you're gonna make things harder than they could be because you'll need to keep going at that pace the whole way through, when 52 seconds would have gotten you to the same place with less effort. If you're aiming for that illustrious GM grade without being armed with the proper knowledge, you're basically getting punished with a harder game for not knowing about a system that you are never supposed to know anything about in the first place. And don't expect the game to be any nicer to you if you're closer to the bottom of the ladder. Take too long to complete a section and you'll get a section regret, resulting in a -1 grade penalty. You can't even rest easy after getting a section cool because the game will take it away from you if you get a regret or outright game over before the end of that section. If you manage to reach level 999 with all 9 section cools and a grade of at least M7, TGM3 will deem you worthy of facing its final challenge. The third factor influencing your grade is the successor to TGM2's M roll, the invisible roll. Any lines cleared during the roll will award way more points than at any other point in the game, meaning mastering Invisible Tetris is non-negotiable if you want to become a Grand Master. But if you do manage to overcome the terrorizing speeds, the Toricons, the section cools, and the ever-challenging Invisible Roll, you will be crowned Master M? You mean that's not enough to get a GM? No, because guess what? We forgot about the account system. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. You, the player, have a class too, and the only way to complete a run and earn the Grandmaster grade for that run is to become a GM player by working your way up from 9. If you play Master Mode a bunch and consistently get grades higher than your current class, you have a random chance of getting a promotional exam. When an exam begins, no more challenges will be forced on. Why? Well, imagine losing a GM run because someone pressed start and you couldn't do anything about it. The game will give you a target grade to reach. Complete that run with that grade or higher to raise your player class to that grade. At least you can finally relax and just get your results, except not, because unless you're well above the passing grade, you don't get to know your results right away. You instead have to sit through an agonizing roulette that keeps you guessing until the very end. And I do mean the very end, because sometimes it'll stop on failed only to troll you and say you actually passed. At least you can finally relax. You made a step in the right direction and things can only go up from there. Except not, because if you consistently get grades lower than your current class, the game subjects you to a demotion exam that decreases your rank by 1 if you fail, and the conditions to avoid a demotion exam get stricter as your rank goes up. And the only way to be qualified for a GM exam is to complete a run that would be a GM if you had the right rank 4 times in the span of 7 runs, and then complete this exam with another GM grade. That's 5 GMs! 5, including one specifically during the exam! Well, Master Mode GM is officially going on my list of things I will never achieve. Want to know what else is going on that list? Shirase S13. Shirase, literally meaning notification of death, is the successor to Tap's The Absolute Death, only exponentially harder, like everything else in this horrifying game. For starters, it's now 1300 levels of hell instead of the usual 999. It's also fast, and I mean really, really fast. I previously said that I can barely get past level 300 in death, but in Shirase, I can barely last over a minute. The delays are staggeringly short and they just keep getting shorter. And now the game goes out of its way to kick you in the stomach and starts adding ridiculous challenges on top of everything else as time goes on. There's a Todikon at level 500. Then until level 1000, garbage will start spawning more and faster with each new section. Then there's a second Todikon at level 1000. Then the colors just dip, and the blocks turn into monochrome brackets like the original Tetris. Not the one on the NES, mind you, the very first one made by Alexei Pajitnov for the Electronica 60. And let me tell you, you do not realize how important those colors are until they're gone. It's suddenly damn hard to tell which piece you're handling at a glance. Then the credits start rolling and the blocks become huge. It's not invisible Tetris, but at these speeds you can die almost instantly because there is quite literally no room for mistakes. This mode doesn't even have a GM. For years, Mihara kept telling everyone, no, Shirase has a GM, you guys just need to get good and you'll get there. No, the man is gaslighting us. It's all lies. People literally reverse engineered the game and found out it really doesn't exist. But the very fact that this mystery endured for several years is telling of how brutal this mode is. Here's how it really works. Every section you survive is a new grade. It's just S1 to S13 minus regrets. I told you this was a horror game. The other ones were definitely really hard, but Shirase and Master Mode especially kind of make me go,
This is impossible! How am I supposed to beat this?
Which begs the question, can a human being even come out of top of this insanity? Yes. Just a very limited number of human beings. Remember when I told you the difference between Classic and World was important? Now is a good time to explain. Classic is rigid, arcane, and punishing, while World is much more SRS, for lack of a better term. So even though this monstrosity of a game is damn near impossible, regardless of the rotation system, Classic GM is truly a step above in terms of difficulty. Can you guess how many classic GMs there are in the entire world as of this video's release? I'm serious, pause the video, type your guesses in the comments. Okay, are you ready? 21. Not 10,000, not 500, not 50, 21. Add to that number the 10 World Rule GMs who don't happen to also be Classic Rule GMs, and that's a total of 27 TGM3 Grand Masters. Regardless of the rotation system used, achieving a GM grade in this game is nothing short of incredible. I have nothing but respect for these players. All 33 of them.
What are you looking for here at the end? The yellow one.
TGM 1 wanted to test you. TGM 2 wanted to push you to your limits. TAP wanted to push you to your absolute limits. TGM 3 is just out to f***ing murder you, then meet you in the afterlife to keep torturing you for the rest of eternity. Terror Instinct is so unbelievably hard that just thinking about the sheer insanity of the challenge is borderline scary. Tetris the Grand Master 3 Terror Instinct is the hardest Tetris game ever made. And yes, I am sure you can figure out some kind of way to craft an even more difficult challenge in another game, but if we're strictly talking about intended gameplay in an official, commercially available Tetris game, it does not get much harder than this. And what did Arika do after that? They tried to make another one. After the slam dunk that was TGM3, Arika spent a couple of years working on other games like Super Dragon Ball Z, Tsubasa Chronicle, and Endless Ocean. Some of their games were kinda sorta close to TGM, games like Jewelry Master, some downloadable Dr. Mario games, and Tetris the Grand Master Ace. Oh shit, I completely forgot about Ace. Okay, Tetris the Grand Master Ace is an Xbox 360 launch game released exclusively in Japan, and the first official TGM game to be released outside of the arcade. This statement alone is full of red flags. Xbox 360? Japan exclusive? Xbox consistently sold very poorly in Japan. Even the Wii U, often considered to be one of the biggest failures in Nintendo history, still sold more in Japan than every Xbox console combined. I guess they figured securing a franchise beloved by Japanese gamers would skew things in their favor, which sounds like a fairly sensible strategy to me. There's only one problem. They screwed up the execution. Before I explain why that is, I want you to take everything I'm about to say with a huge grain of salt, because I don't have a copy of this game, neither do I have a Japanese Xbox 360, nor do I have the funds to fix any of those problems. So I got my information from blurry gameplay videos, wiki entries, and interviews with TGM experts instead. I can't have the full picture unless I play the game, so my information is going to be incomplete to some extent. Anyhow, TGM Ace features a bunch of modes where the goal is to clear 150 lines within a time limit in each 10-line section. The grading system is more or less gone. Promotional exams and player ranks are still a thing, but the GM rank is gone. It's TM instead. What, like Tetris Master? You get to pick between 3 rotation systems. SRS is guideline Tetris as usual. ARS is supposed to be the classic rule, but it's been butchered beyond recognition. While the spawn positions, rotation rules, and kicks are the same as TGM3, the Sega colors are gone. Sonic drop, gone. And to add insult to injury, you can now do this. You get to reset the lock timer by rotating or moving a piece up to 128 times. No, that's not infinity, but it might as well be. Challenge? Gone. They tried to fix it with an extra rotation system called ARS2, but all it does is bring back the Sonic drop controls, up to teleport and down to lock. Nothing else has changed. I will concede that some modes get pretty fast, but still, it's not enough. The only mode available at first is normal, which unlocks high speed 1, which unlocks high speed 2, which doesn't unlock anything? Yes, the only way to unlock them is to have an Xbox Live Gold account. Respect? Gone. Doubles mode doesn't even have a leaderboard. Versus mode is apparently pretty bad too, but I guess I can give them a point for bringing back doubles. It's a start. And I kept the best one for last. Master mode? Gone. You make a video game called Tetris the Grand Master, but it doesn't have Master mode. What is the point of making a TGM game if it doesn't have Master mode? That completely defeats the purpose of even making a TGM game in the first place. That's like making a Smash Brothers game that doesn't have Smash mode. At this point, it's not even a TGM game anymore. It's the ship of Tetris. This whole game just reeks of reluctance to me. It's a cheap cash grab, and most of the shots were clearly called by suits who didn't give Arika nearly enough time or budget to develop a great game. Most of the features that made TGM so unique and respected are gone, and the few good things I can say about this game from the information I gathered is that it features some sick remixes of classic themes and probably the most Russian-sounding version of Type A I have ever heard. The rest of the music is recycled from 3, but 3 had a pretty kick-ass soundtrack to begin with, so I can let that one slide. There's also this interesting hot seat single player mode where players virtually line up and watch other players while waiting for their turn to play. It's like being at the arcade. Pretty cool. I'm sure it's a perfectly fine Tetris game, but next to the other TGM games, it does look a little weird. Okay, but then if TGM Ace isn't that much of a TGM game, where is the next true mainline game? Where the hell is TGM 4? Well, it was released just a little while ago as of the release of this video, but just a few years ago, this would have been a pipe dream for any TGM fan. The game stayed in development hell for over 15 years, and the story behind its development cycle is utterly insane. I could easily spend an hour talking about TGM 4 alone, and who knows, I just might. I left a lot of TGM4 research and information out of this video to avoid making it too long and too complicated to make, but I might just take all of that research and turn it into its own video, after I recover from the creative burnout stemming from this video also being in development hell for 2+ years. Oops. There is, however, one final thing I want to cover before I go. While I somehow spent over an hour talking extensively about the history of TGM up to Ace, I didn't spend a whole lot of that time comparing it to Guideline Tetris, and I believe doing so is essential to truly make you understand just how much the Grand Master series differs from other Tetris games. The Guideline Tetris philosophy is a bit like the Nintendo philosophy. Fun for everyone, be as accessible as possible. It's meant to give the player more power, to make the game easier to pick up for beginners and more interesting to watch for viewers, and if veteran players don't like it, then they can just ignore it. After 25 years, we are thinking that there are still people that don't know how to play Tetris after the first 30 seconds. Well, we have to simplify it for them. There are the extremely young and the extremely computer illiterate who have never touched a computer before. We are working with people in old people's homes, trying to figure out how do we make a game that works for them. That's fine for them. That's not to say Guideline games don't care about challenging veteran players. High level versus Tetris with its many openers and setups and T-spins and lightning fast speed is hard. Competitive sprint is really, really hard. But then you glance at TGM and it's a whole different ball game. This is a series made by hardcore players for hardcore players. The TGM philosophy is to bring the player to the absolute limit of what's humanly possible, constantly beating them over the head to play faster and stack better. Unlike Guideline games, new mechanics are never given for free. TGM 2 introduces the Sonic Drop, but in return expects you to play faster and stay in control the whole way through. TGM 3 introduces Hold, 3-piece preview and floor kicks for the eyepiece, but increases the challenge dramatically with Toricons, harsher speed curves, section cools, and the exam system. And let's not forget about speed. TGM wants you to go fast. 20G makes things fast. Sonic Drop makes things fast. Not to mention that none of the TGM games, not even the first one, will let you get a GM based on score alone. TGM 1 and 2 have a giant timer staring menacingly at you at all times, and then 3 shrunk the timer, but only to make room for the insults it throws at you when you're not playing fast enough. That's not to say TGM makes zero effort to be accessible to beginners. Tap has normal mode and TGM 3 has easy mode. Even if you play master mode or death or Shirase, no one's forcing you to get to the top grade. You can just play as far as you can and still have loads of fun. That's what I've been doing for years. But if you want to get that shiny GM grade, you have to work for it. There are no shortcuts. I can say without a shadow of a doubt that TGM is my series of choice as far as single-player Tetris is concerned. I believe NES Tetris is rigid to a fault and Guideline Tetris is flexible to a fault, but TGM falls snugly in the middle for me. Take the randomizer. In NES Tetris, it's almost completely random with very few protections against droughts, meaning you could go on without an eyepiece for 25 or 50 pieces, or get 3 eyepieces in a row. This randomizer is rigid. Meanwhile, in Guideline Tetris and TGM Ace, you have the 7-bag randomizer, which generates a set of all 7 pieces ordered randomly, then deals them to you, then does the whole thing again. This makes the piece sequence very predictable. So predictable, in fact, that there's an entire meta around openers. So predictable that there are algorithms to quite literally keep playing forever. This randomizer is flexible. Meanwhile, TGM 1 and 2 are sort of like NES Tetris, with pieces being dealt at random as long as it's not one of the last 4 pieces you got for TGM 1 and one of the last 6 for 2. TGM 3 is built a little different, using a 35 bag containing 5 of each piece ordered randomly and adding the least recent piece back into the bag every time a new piece is dealt. These randomizers are somewhat flexible. I got a lot of comments on my last Tetris video saying, NES Tetris forever, screw the guideline, and I'm sure a lot of those people would really enjoy TGM's more balanced approach in regards to its mechanics. That's what makes it all the more depressing that this series stayed stuck in the arcade for over 2 decades. Eureka tried and failed to release home ports of TGM 3 times. TGM 1 was meant to have a PS1 port, but it was never released because there were already too many Tetris games on that console. TGM 2 was at one point meant to have a PS2 port, but it was never released, probably because of licensing issues. Other Tetris games made it just fine on the PS2, but the pieces just couldn't seem to fall into place for Eureka. There's this mysterious game called TGMK that allegedly appeared in a PSP launch title list at some point, but then it just vanished without a single screenshot or video. Tetris with Card Captor Sakura Eternal Heart is not a TGM game, and Tetris the Grand Master Ace is a console TGM game in name and not much else. It's only in late 2022 that our dreams finally came true. Before that port, the only Tetris game that even came close to hitting those TGM vibes was Tetris 99. It's clearly wearing the inspiration on its sleeve. A robotic voice says, An alert sound begins playing when you're nearly dead. You collect badges during gameplay. Pieces fade out from the bottom when you top out. And get this, clear some lines and take a closer look at the stack. This animation looks familiar, doesn't it? The very concept of this game is reminiscent of TGM. Unlike other guideline games, the main idea is to challenge the player, not to be fun for everyone. You can't win at Tetris 99 without learning how to play the game properly, or at least take some time to learn some of the more busted setups. Whoever made this game really likes TGM, and it all makes sense when you read the very first name appearing in the credits. Producer/Tetris Master 2009. Ichiro Mihara. Further down, you can also find Hitoshi Hiroshima, better known as Jin 8, the legendary player behind the TGM3 gameplay seen at the very beginning of this video. Shinji Hosoe and Ayako Saso, the composers behind TGM3's incredible soundtrack, are also found in the credits. And of course, there's Akira Nishitani, Eureka's founder and president. Tetris 99 was made by none other than Eureka, bringing the two Tetris branches together at long last. It's not a reluctant inclusion of the SRS or some messed up Frankenstein's monster of rotation systems or an unofficial clone. It's just a guideline game made by Eureka. And yes, I know Sega themselves made their share of guideline games too, but let me have my fun telling my story, okay? It's both beautiful and fascinating to see just how differently the core Tetris concept, or hell, any concept, can evolve when given to different people, to the right people. To this day, many players still hold the TGM series in very high regard. Early in my research for this video, I reached out to Suito Green Tea, one of the best, and in my opinion, most versatile Tetris players out there. I sent him a couple of questions to try and get a pulse on how Japanese players perceive TGM and whether their perception of the series changed over time. I think there is no future for this kind of high difficulty Tetris, because I feel frustrated every time I play a high-speed Tetris with the SRS. Others, quite frankly, made me a little sad. I feel a little sad that I have fewer friends to play with at the arcade, but the positive remarks were absolutely glowing. Games I can play for a lifetime. I can't be satisfied with other Tetris games. First game to make me realize I'm a big fish in a small pond. Such is the impact that a simple puzzle game had and continues to have on people. So the next time you meet a Tetris player and you're tempted to say, "Okay, grandpa," thinking Tetris hasn't changed since the 80s, or it's just falling blocks, how complicated can it be? I hope you remember even 1% of this video. A video that tells the story of an alternate Tetris timeline, beginning with Sega's Tetris and ending, against all odds, with Tetris the Grand Master 4, The Absolute Eye. After 20 years, a new contender can finally claim the crown of the hardest Tetris game ever made.